This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hi, I'm Dean Gation, and this is the Powerful Connections podcast. For over 40 years, I've been involved in planning and building high-voltage projects. My company, DGG5 Advising, is the opportunity maker you need for your energy and construction projects. My guests and I are going to share our experiences and how we have brought projects to successful completion. We are going to continue our discussion on relationships and connections. Joining me today is a longtime friend, Mike Doherty. Mike is one of the most passionate people I know in health and safety. His expertise is well known in Canada and the U.S. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you've come from.
I was born and raised in Sudbury, Ontario in Canada, which is a mining community. In fact, my dad was an underground miner back in the days when they didn't have all the big equipment. He used to use 2 jack legs at one time. They would drill into the ceilings, and then they would take about a 12-foot iron bar and poke it up into the loose, pull it down, step back. If they didn't do a good job, the loose could come down behind them, and that would have been the end of it. So I have it's really in my DNA when we talk about Sudbury. We talk about mining, which has its safety pieces and so much money to be made in the mining industry. I went to St. Charles College in Sudbury. I went to Cameron College for 2 years, industrial instrumentation program. Moved to Kincardine, Ontario for about 11 years. Then moved on to Oshawa, Ontario, lived there for 31 years. And about 3 years ago, last month, moved to Port Perry, Ontario, where I'm still continuing to work here, doing online training. I do consulting. I go out, out into the workplace and do that as well. So a big history in my DNA with safety. I can't help it. It's just the way that I am.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the history you and I had. But tell me a little bit about the influences that brought you from instrumentation and Cambrian to safety professional. That's a long leap, but give us a little highlight of how you got there.
Started out, in fact, I've told the story a few times. My father-in-law was killed at 46 years old, working for the biggest mining company in Sudbury at the time. 3 teenage kids at home. That got my attention. My dad was very safety conscious. As I just said, it is in my DNA. I had the opportunities many times at work. I would run all the safety meetings for 150 people. I was asked to do it. I liked doing it. And just went that way, and then ended up becoming the electrical safety program coordinator at our nuclear power plant. I did that the last 6-7 years. I was given an opportunity to travel to the United States. I was on the NFPA 70E electrical safety standard. I was the very first technical committee chair of CSA Z462, which is a workplace electrical safety standard of Canada. In fact, I was the technical committee chair for the first 4 editions of CSA Z462 from 2006 right up to December 2018. I've also been the chair of CAN ULCS-801, which is the Transmission Distribution Power Generation Standard of Canada. So in fact, we have 2 electrical safety standards. I like doing it. I like working with the people that are there. And it's important work, and it's something to learn, which I do like.
That'll be one of our topics today, but we have a number of favorite topics that Mike loves to expand on when you're with him. We're going to touch on them briefly today. There are very important aspects of how we can connect with your organization to help in many aspects. My background has a huge history in developing various aspects of any business, its processes, and how to make them a powerful connection for your organization. So the big item in connection with people in the electrical utility and high voltage construction and maintenance industry is safety. It's the core of any business. It is absolutely the center of everything we do in high voltage. It is the critical difference between doing high risk well and having serious issues. We have always characterized them as worker safety and safe work methods. So all of the items that get connected in safety are a long list: employee training, project planning, quality management systems, health and safety management systems, environmental management, engineering, procurement, project execution. All items have safety in them as the starting point. So we're going to touch on safety, how it's created, manifested, delivered, and transferred. And Mike, if you can give me a few thoughts quickly on all these aspects we go through and how they're connected.
The thing that really strikes me, Dean, is when you and I met, it was in Toronto. I was asked to do a presentation for the Association of Electric Utility Safety Professionals, and it was probably 25 people in the room. I did the presentation. You and I were walking out of the room, and we started to talk as we walked down the hall. Every single one of those bullet points you just went through, employee training, right down to project execution, we immediately hit it off. We were aligned culturally, technically, and more than anything, we really truly cared. We could tell right away. You and I know right away if someone cares about what they do. So that's exactly why we have known each other for a long time.
The ability to transfer knowledge is critical in training, mentoring, and coaching, and many places assign or match up senior persons to new people. We see it in the trades, journey person aligned with an apprentice, project managers having people shadowing them or assistants. So let me hear your views on coaching and the application of this notion of working with new people to transfer knowledge.
Coaching is a critical part of a high-end organization. Rather than having people tell you what to do at all times, which sometimes is important, we like to coach, we like to mentor, we like to hear what people think. We like to have an interaction and a good high-end communication with people. And that's what you do when you coach. I coached hockey, I coached lacrosse for 20 years with kids organizations, and you realize very quickly, if I have 16 to 18 players on my lacrosse team or my hockey team, you can't treat them all the same way. Some of them, you have to get all over them. Others, you stay very, very quiet. Others, you come over, you just whisper to them quietly, and I like that. So coaching is a talent that some people have, some people do not, but that's the way you need to run a business, in my opinion.
Agreed. In coaching, there is mentoring, and it can take on many forms. Those that gave you a start or help you grow or move on are all mentors. I had many mentors in my lifetime, both personally and in business, and there was always certain things that we saw were key to their success. So give me a little bit of what you feel and you've observed over the years that are attributes of a great mentor.
I look back, I have about 48 years of working. I'm still working pretty hard. And I can tell you there are 3 to 4, maybe 5 people that I worked for or with. I would like to say I worked with them, even though I was working for them. They took a little more time to understand that what I was just saying, that people are different. I have my own techniques. I have my own way of communicating, and they were respectful and professional when it came to the way that I like to communicate. They knew I was always going to do my job, but they were caring, and it's important that you do it that way. So a mentor needs to be someone who can listen, who can pass on all the things that they were taught and all the things that they saw with time. That's what makes a really good coach and or mentor.
One of the things that I want to be able to talk about here, and you're always a big advocate of it, is great books that are out there. And one of the great books I had was The Best Team Wins, and it talks about the collaboration of people and the mentoring and coaching of people and the mix of the baby boomers and Generation X, Generation Y, the millennials, and so forth. And it's nice to see that it is different, the manner in which you talk to people. So I think mentoring is a big one. It's things that we have to talk about some more. Anyways, we're going to move on to risk assessment. One of the things that we've always tried to get across is the difference between risk assessment and hazard recognition. We've created some great procedures together over the years that help create risk registries, the process of risk assessment, project hazard planning, and how to reduce risk or eliminate risk. So give me a little bit of your view of risk assessment, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the details of this and some of your favorite terms.
Risk assessment procedure, risk assessment concepts are absolutely some of my most favorite topics, and I'm very passionate about them. Our CSA Z462 technical committee, we had about 37 members on or off over those years. And we worked really, really hard on establishing risk assessment into CSA Z462 Workplace Electrical Safety Standard. Ultimately, risk assessment comes from ISO 31000, which is a global risk standards of global experts who have really put a lot of thought. Academic people, practical people, pragmatic people have put ISO 31000 in place. CSA Z1002 has a big, long title, but ultimately it is the risk assessment or the risk standard of Canada, which has benchmarked ISO 31000. All we did on our Z462 committee is we extracted the three components of risk assessment procedure, which are 3 steps. First step is you identify hazards. We don't assess risks, or we don't assess hazards. We identify hazards. Step 2 is we estimate the potential damage severity to health for the specific task you are on. Step 3 of risk assessment procedure generically is implement the risk controls. And there's about 7 of them, from elimination right down to PPE, engineering controls, training, knowledge in between. Those things are so important because they work. In the United Kingdom, it is a law and a regulation that you will execute risk assessment procedure per task. Here in North America, it's a best practice. So some people get it, some people don't. Why is that important? In the UK, they have about 1/4 the workplace fatalities we have in North America because risk assessment procedure is the law, and it's implemented far more widely than it is here. It's a stunning statistic. It works. It can be used for economics. It can be used for safety. Risk assessment procedure.
Yeah, we get into absolutely everything. The basis of business is the mix of financial, safety, quality, environmental, and everything has to have its own value, but it's got to work together. The next part of the risk assessment is training, knowledge, and experience, and we always talk about a competent worker. Talk to me a little bit about your views on a competent worker.
Competent workers is actually defined in the Ontario OH&S law. There's the competent worker, there's the competent supervisor. There's about 3 components to it from the what we call the Green Book. You have to have the training, knowledge, and experience to organize the work and its performance. You need to know what's in the Green Book. What are the laws in the province of Ontario or the United States or in British Columbia, Section 19, electrical safety, whatever it happens to be. And then you also have to have knowledge of any hazards in the workplace. Those 3 pieces, and it covers everything. Typically, just like all legislation and law in OH&S, it tells you what to do. Don't get shocked, don't get burned, don't get run over, don't fall, but it doesn't tell you how to do that. That's why we have standards like Z462, S801. All of these standards are put in place to tell you what to do, or tell you how to do it, not what to do.
So one of your favorite terms that you and I have been discussing recently has been residual risk. Tell me why this is a favorite term and what it's sort of describing to you and how you use it.
Residual risk is actually a definition in CAN ULC S-801, Transmission, Distribution, Power Generation Standard of Canada. And sometimes you've been on a job and a task, someone, a worker, a supervisor, or manager will tell you, I think it's acceptable risk for you to do the task this way. That's very opinion-based, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not good. Residual risk is a technical term that clearly says residual risk is the risk remaining after risk assessment procedure. 3 comprehensive, competent steps have been executed by people who know what they're doing. So residual risk is the risk remaining after risk assessment procedure, not just somebody's opinion. And it changes everything, in my opinion.
That's certainly outlook, deliverables, and how to handle it. One of the things that we've talked about in residual risk is to get past the term that's considered clarity versus murkiness. And those are some big words. Clarity is one of my favorite words these days that I use in the Indigenous world, but in the safety world, clarity versus murkiness has a specific meaning for you. Let's hear it.
Clarity, everybody thinks they understand clarity, and they do. What I always say when I mention the word clarity, the antonyms to clarity are murkiness and vagueness. Everybody understands murky and vague. Your grandmother understands murky and vague. Yeah. Poor verbal instructions, poor procedures, or no written procedures. There's a book from Patrick Lencioni called The Advantage. It's all about organizational health, and he speaks to the word clarity at all times. It is the single most important piece when you're doing anything in the workplace, for safety, for business. Anything that's murky and vague, don't be surprised if people get hurt. Don't be surprised if you wreck equipment. Don't be surprised if you lose money. Extreme, and the way the senior managers need to provide clarity. And there's four things. That's the first thing. The second step is supervisors, for example, in a workplace safety piece, they have to establish extreme clarity. The third thing is they reinforce clarity. The fourth thing the supervisor and the crew needs to do is overemphasize clarity. Nothing murky, nothing vague. Workers love to get extreme clarity because they all want to do a good job. So do the supervisors, so do the managers, so does the senior executive team. Clarity is king.
The big connection that I always liked was to see the workers kind of lean in like the old Hutton commercials where they'd lean in and listen to the supervisor and whatever the supervisor said, and they'd often go and do their thing. And it's not really a military thing, it's a more of a team thing and a camaraderie thing that give me some instructions, cut me loose, I'll go get it done. And people love to have direction. They like to have procedures. They like to have the tasks so they can deliver on it. So the next part of this, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to quality job planning and tailboards. And one of my favorite things, I'm a big basketball nut, and one of my favorite sayings comes from John Wooden, the famous NCAA coach of the UCLA Bruins basketball team of the 60s and 70s. He always stated, if you fail to plan, your plan will fail. And he had many great players, and he put them together as a team to combine their skills to get great results. And they were well versed in what they created, that their results were 10 championships in 12 years between 64 and 75, just unheard of. Over the years, I've created great things for people to utilize: construction management plans, emergency response plans, environmental management plans, quality management plans, health and safety management plans, and all of those have to come out every day in quality job planning and the simple activities of tailboards. Tell me and review with us what you see as great tailboards.
The base concept for, and I call them quality tailgates, quality tailboards. As a matter of fact, I work with the LDCs, and when I work with them for a day, but I will never let them say the word tailgate or tailboard. I always say, what kind? And they go, oh, quality. It's important. Anybody can pencil whip, the document. It needs to bring extreme clarity. The power linemen, for example, have so much knowledge, but I think sometimes we skip over. Say, these are the hazards. This is what I need you to do. And if they're working with a team or a supervisor that doesn't ask for their professional opinions, we lose the clarity. We don't get good tailboards. We don't get good tailgates, or we used to call them pre-job briefs. It's super important to do this correctly. It's very professional, very detailed. We're paying attention.
I always like that the items that come out of this show a structure, and it gets to a corporate organization that needs to function well, and how great culture from top-down communications to have great results. And to facilitate and identify the tailboards is a good thing, but the next part of my discussion with you is to hear what you feel or what you call organizational health.
It literally starts at the top, and people can tell. The average adult can tell very quickly whether the leaders, the managers, are giving them the right details to do the work. Mostly people will just stay very quiet if they don't like it. Some will speak up. Those are the ones that are more difficult to deal with sometimes. But organizational health, the book, The Advantage, I know a company down in Iowa, an electrical company, that changed everything. I said they couldn't believe bringing that clarity, bringing that organizational health to it. People like to be with a winner. Quite frankly, there's a lot of people now moving around job to job to job, but if they can work for a company that has great organizational health, they are far more inclined to stay with all the things that you've learned, all the money you put into them to get them, through indoctrinations and training classes. So there's huge financial advantage as well to making sure that you have a great organization and it is very healthy. It's almost like anything. Health is important.
What do you feel is a good descriptor to a notion in an organization of the courage to do the right thing?
We talk about mission, vision, and value statements for many, many companies, and they're up on the wall, they're up on a plaque. Everybody's doing it, and it's one of the things that the senior teams need to put in place. And a lot of they talk about leadership endlessly. Stephen Covey's got the four concepts of leadership and things. You have to have the courage. Leadership courage is something that I speak to all the time these days. Do the leaders have the courage to do the right thing? If you come from a culture where the leaders have not had leadership courage, they tend to surround themselves with other people that don't have a lot of courage. And after 20 years, you have a whole culture in a workplace where nobody will say anything and you're just not executing your safety or your financials like you should be. But as I used to say when you and I were working together with the power linemen, these are smart people. You have to be respectful and professional with power linemen. They understand very clearly if you're BSing them. They need to know that you know and that you care. And if you don't know, you ask what's going on. So you have to have the courage to show some vulnerability, to ask, surround yourself with really good people. You have to have the courage. When something goes wrong, say, you know what, I own part of that problem. I know you guys were down, you were working aloft, you were in a bucket, something didn't go well, but you know what, I feel accountable for that too. I have the courage to say so. And you've got to be in an organization where it's okay to do that. And that comes from the top.
One of the things I used to tell everybody is if you do everything we ask of you and you're doing your very best and something does go wrong, I will be there. I will stand in front of you. I will take on whatever has to be done, because as soon as something goes wrong, all of the toughness comes out of the world. Inspections, finding fault, root cause analysis, all the things that come up with equipment damage, property damage, personal injury, and going through all that. We had quite an occurrence in Newfoundland a few years ago that I had to go and get through the process, and it brought us to a point of restart. And I think one of the big things in the courage to do the right thing is the ability to stand up and reset and get everybody in the right frame of mind so that they can continue working. It's a big one. We're going to go to some of the foundational items of where we have to start each day, and that's standards, regulations, and guides in our industry. And that needs some clarification and how the dots are connected. We always talk about what's embedded in the regulations, the electrical utility safety rules, the utility work protection code. You always talk about benchmarks, and I always talk about expectations and requirements, and we get to utility best practices. But talk to me about some of the electrical standards inside CSA and their importance to everyday activities.
Electrical safety standards are critical to the workplace, and it's an opportunity to learn from other experts in the field and to find out what it is that they know, what they think. CSA Z 462, for example, the utility world in Canada has an exclusion of that, and that's fine. There are things in there that we can use, the human performance piece, which we're going to look to speak to a little bit. There are always segments in any standard we can learn from. I was saying even if there was a country in South America that had an electrical safety standard that had a piece, one page of a 100-page document that I thought was valuable, I will use it, adapt it, and add it. Anything that I can learn from any standard. Z463 is electrical maintenance standard of Canada. Z460 is the lockout tagout standard, which is in the industrial world is the equivalent of the utility work protection code for the utility group. There are things we can learn from each other. The risk assessment standard 1002, CSA Z45001, which is the health and safety managed system standard, which should be the foundation where all of these things go. And then, of course, in the utility world, CAN ULC S-801, transmission, distribution, and power generation standard of Canada. We're always benchmarking from other standards in the spirit of continual improvement.
Thanks for that description. They're important to understand all these things that are there and how to utilize them and what they apply to. I've always liked the connection to the quality standards, ISO, of some of the things that happen here in the CSA stuff and the Z standards. My greatest times were on projects where I got to interact with some of our outstanding supervisors and project leaders, and their attributes created a closeness, a comfort, and an understanding. What are we doing? When are we doing it? How are we going to execute? Their support and communications were key to being confident and focused on what we were doing, especially in energized situations, critical lift activities, traffic control, or stringing. What are the points you want to show us that demonstrate outstanding supervisors and managers?
It's interesting. I keep going back to the same concepts. You talk about what are you doing? When are you doing it? It all comes back to clarity. And the team needs to know what to do. They also are very appreciative when the team knows what to do. Right down to the workers, right up to the CEO. They want that clarity and that knowledge to execute safe work, timely work. And, you do need to make a profit. All those, as you know, you and I have mentioned it many times. My little motto, my one-man company is good safety is good business. It really is.
Absolutely.
It's critical.
In all the things we do, there's tracking, there's record keeping, there's data. What do you feel are leading and lagging indicators? Everyone's aware of them. I know you did a paper on it this year, but the enabling loops and senior management levels, talk to us a little bit. We've always had our good friend Andy Kerr and the notions of, why things are happening. So anyways, give us a little bit of background on what you call enabling loops.
Everyone speaks to leading indicators, lagging indicators. Leading indicators, are proactive, preventive, predictive measures that can provide information about effective performance of safety and health issues, as one example. And they measure events leading up to injuries, illness, those kind of things. Lagging indicators, they measure the occurrence and frequency of events that occurred in the past, things that have already happened. I took an online course with a bunch of Europeans about a year and a half ago. And it was really interesting. They talked to the enabling loops. If someone gets hurt and/or wrecks equipment, for example, often they just want to blame the worker, maybe the supervisor, and then they stop asking why it happened. If you continue to ask why 5 or 6 times, you tell me why it happened. I said, well, why did that happen? And then you tell me that, and I said, well, why did that happen? If you have the leadership courage and the culture, no blame culture, if you go far enough up the food chain, you'll find that quite possibly the senior executive team or the CEO enabled that lagging indicator at the end. So if you have the courage to say, we understand, we bring some clarity to this position. The worker screwed up, the supervisor screwed up, but we all screwed up. We need to be a learning organization. We want to get better. It's the only way. It isn't going to happen again. If we stop asking why and we don't get to the potential enabling loops, we will never stop the occurrence from happening again.
One of the things that has always been, for me, the root cause analysis chart and flow chart of how you get to how things started, and it keeps asking why, or yes and no. And if it's yes, over here. If it's no, over here. Then why again? And like you said, if you ask why 5, 6, or 7 times, you might get close to why this started. Anyways, I'm going to go to housekeeping real quick. I think we've hit
Sure.
leading and lagging indicators real well. There's something that people need to look at and can come back to us and talk about. Housekeeping is a big one. The value of housekeeping to me has always been huge. Take the few seconds to wrap up a job, take a few minutes to organize what you're doing, the tripping hazards, the garbage. Anyways, talk to us a little bit about the value of housekeeping.
Housekeeping is a visual indicator of how much your people care about the quality of their work, about the quality of the safety of their work. We had one of our power plants a number of years ago, a big INPO Institute nuclear power operators coming in to do big audits, and they find everything. I did 4 electrical safety audits in the United States at nuclear power plants, doing that kind of thing. This group of 6 or 7 people came into the plant. They had to go through security. They looked up at the ceiling tiles in the security, and some of them were out of place. The cables were hanging. It got their attention, but they kept going. The only way to get into that plant, they had to go through the lunchroom. The lunchroom, unfortunately, was kind of a pigsty. They hadn't put away the dishes. There were trays, all kinds of things. The leader of the audit stopped. He said, that's it. He turned around and walked right back out, and they called the plant manager and said, we're stopping the audit. He said, why? Because your housekeeping is terrible. It's a visual indicator that things are not where they need to be. And you can eat off the floors in those plants for the last 20 years because of that incident. It was embarrassing. They didn't like it, and it's visual, and there's nowhere to hide.
Your very good friend Lanny Floyd, you introduced me to him a few years ago, and he talks about all those things that he took DuPont out of in the 70s, and he is now the world guru on that stuff. And it's just amazing to hear the little things over the years that have aspired to show off the bigger things.
Absolutely correct.
No blame culture. The non-reprimand atmosphere we always found creates a great culture of communications, hazard recognition, and the near-miss promotions. That when we created the near-miss process as a leading indicator of safety awareness, and that it was a good thing, not a bad thing. It means we observed something before it caused an incident. Most of it was simple little things, but talk to me a little bit about your notion of no blame.
No blame is another critical factor. If we talk about human performance, we're going to do that shortly. If the managed system blames people when things go wrong, everybody will clam up, everybody will get quiet. You will never be an outstanding learning organization. I know that when you and your brother Wayne, you guys were very clear when you had an issue. You got right to the core part of it. We talked about the supervisor working with the hydrovac machine guy that one day, and we went out. The hydrovac machine was not implementing a good traffic control. Our people weren't making sure that they were. You called in the hydrovac owner the next day because they were a contractor. He thought he was in big trouble, that he was going to get hammered. That's not what you did. What you did was you said, we have a problem. Traffic control is not good enough. We have an opportunity to fix that. So we need you to go and take the traffic control course from IHSA, which they did. I added a 4-hour workshop because even our people were having a hard time getting the clarity. Once we did those things, that company started a new cost center, and a new cost center doing traffic control in the Sudbury region, which was outstanding. They became world-class at it. They made more money. Good safety is good business. And we got better traffic control when we hired them. So that was a great indicator of a no-blame culture, but it's an opportunity for improvement. We do need to do better, and we will.
Yeah, the doing better was always, front and center in any inspections, any observations. Everything could have a little tweak. We'd always look at it. Our plan, do, check, act process that we hit was always a big item for us to make sure that we were in a good position, that people were constantly looking at those opportunities for improvement. So inside of this, now we're talking about human performance. So the key performance indicators every day that we look at, everyone is measured. So what do you see are some of the performance error precursors and some of the human performance tools? What do you promote that affects these, and how do we get to be motivators and not detractors?
Along with risk assessment procedure based on standards, one of my absolute most favorite things to speak to is human performance. In 2012, when I was the chair of Z462, I asked our CSA Z462 technical committee to consider putting an annex into Z462 in regards to human performance. Human performance is a best practice. It started, and it's certainly one of the places it started, with the U.S. Nuclear Navy submariners. They don't like to have a problem when they're 2 miles underneath the sea in a nuclear sub. So they started to study in the 1980s the U.S. medical industry errors, and they studied the U.S. airline industry errors. We have a lot of interest in both of those things. Our families go to hospitals. They still have a lot of issues. The airline industry is better than they've ever been. So they studied those and they implemented them in the U.S. nuclear submarines. A lot of workers, managers, supervisors, when they leave the U.S. Navy, they end up getting jobs in the U.S. nuclear power plants. Any number of years ago, we brought in an American to run the Ontario-based nuclear power plants, and they injected this human performance best practice to us. At the time, we thought it was a little over the top, and it absolutely is not. One of the jewels of CSA Z462 is Human Performance Annex U. There are a list of error precursors, and again, your grandmother understands these error precursors, distractions, unfamiliar with the task. All of these things exist in electrical, in mechanical, they exist in the financial worlds, the things that you're so good at. You know, when you do risk assessment procedures for getting work done, for spending money, for getting things done correctly, working with people, all of those things are risks. That is simply an outstanding annex, and we gave it to our American friends. We put it in Z462 in 2015 edition. We tried to put it as a public input to our American friends in 2015. They didn't want it. But after they looked at it for 3 years, they put it in the 2018 edition of NFPA 70E. I think it needs to be copy-pasted into CAN ULC S-801. It absolutely does. Hopefully that will happen with time. The human performance, so all the error precursors sit there, and if we had time, we could go all through them. But the human performance tools, so what you've got these error precursors, you got people that are having problems at home, you get all kinds of error precursors for everything. What are the human performance tools that an outstanding supervisor or manager can put in place to lower the risk of error precursors? That's what everything's about risk. That's what I say. Your risk assessments are so important. One of my favorite ones is a repeat back. So you get a utility power line maintainer, supervisor implements a quality tailboard. He identifies all the hazards going aloft, the shock, the arc flash pieces, falling, traffic control, with great clarity, executes all of these portions. He identifies all the hazards. And they talk about the risks. What is the estimation of potential damages severity? If you're just going up to look around, there's not a lot of risk. But if you're going up to do energized work on distribution systems, the estimated potential damage severity health could be significant, which is step 2. Step 3, what are your risk controls? You put those risk controls in place. The part that we miss often, we don't ask enough of our power linemen, is tell me about what do you think the risks are? Has anybody done this job before? You know, it changes everything. So those risk controls, the repeat back portion is you go through, you identify the hazards, talk about the risks. What are the risk controls? And then you got that one guy in the back, you know, he's got the hat pulled down a little bit. You haven't left the shop yet. You say, hey, Johnny, can I get a repeat back? Because this is a human performance tool to lower the risk of error precursors. Johnny, I need a repeat back in everything I just asked the crew to do. If I don't hear every single thing that we went through with extreme clarity, with good communication skills, you know what? the good thing about the PLT world is we have a shovel and you could dig a ditch for the day. You're not going to work with our crew if you cannot repeat back. The good thing about a repeat back is a good supervisor only asks for repeat back occasionally, intermittently. The whole crew is never sure when you're asking for repeat back, so they're starting to pay attention. And the only other thing I like to mention about that being my favorite human performance tool is that if you've got 2 new people on the crew, you say, hey, Bob, after you do your quality tailboard, Bob, I need a repeat back and everything. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He hammers everything. And the 2 new people go, wow, they didn't have this kind of clarity. They didn't talk like this where I came from. They like it. They want to go home. They want to execute at high level. It's win, win, win. So I cannot emphasize.
You only got to do that a couple times.
Yeah, I can't emphasize human performance best practices better. It is a wonderful tool.
We're coming up on time, and I'm going to get to kind of final remarks. I know we've talked about a lot of things today and the passion of it. And when I get to anything I'm doing today, I've got clarity, capacity, and certainty, and they just seem to hit everything we do. But give us some final remarks before we finish up.
Well, it just dawns on me, I wasn't planning to say this thing, but I just like to thank you. You're one of my most favorite mentors that I have had an opportunity to work with. I can remember clear as a bell walking out of that room, which I mentioned earlier with you, and what a great opportunity that was for me to learn. I'm still going hard because I like to learn. I like to think. If I wasn't learning, I wouldn't be very happy. So opportunities for improvement have been substantial. It's important. You need to be with people who care about what it is that they do. So that's why I appreciate working with you. And it's been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Thanks very much. Mike, we appreciate you joining me today. That was energetic, as I know it would always be. Next episode, we are going to talk risk management with another good friend of mine in the insurance world, Guy Jollicure. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Powerful Connections. Get in touch with me on my website at dgg5advising.com or find me on LinkedIn at Dean G. Gation. See ya in the next episode.